It is good to be in Selma. It is good. It's good to be in Selma, and it's good to say that in 4 days, with the help of the great people of North Carolina, we're going to send Kamala Harris to San Francisco, where she belongs, and we're going to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. Now, we've got a lot of special guests here. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to some of those special guests. We've, of course, got the great RNC chair, Michael Whatley. Michael, thank you so much for your leadership and everything you're doing. Seated next to Michael is, of course, my favorite person in the rally. No offense to anybody here, but my lovely wife, Usha, is here on the trail with us. We've got a special guest, but he's on the way. His flight was late, but if I talk for long enough, then Donald Trump Jr. is going to be here later, so we'll say hey to Don. I've got to talk for a very long time for Don to get here, but that's okay. That's all right. We'll do that. You know, you guys have one of my favorite people in Washington. I'm sad to say, I think we're going to lose him because he's going to become the next Attorney General for the state of North Carolina, Dan Bishop. Dan, thank you so much for your leadership, man. Where is Dan? Maybe he's with Don. And then, of course, we've got congressional candidate Brad Knott. Brad, thanks so much for your leadership and for stepping up. And when you guys send Brad to Washington, you send Donald J. Trump to the White House, we're going to do a lot of good together for the people of North Carolina. So God bless you, Brad, for being willing to serve. Now, I want to start here because I don't want to screw this up about early voting because, you know, at this point I'm spending, I'm seeing 4 different states every single day. So earlier in Michigan, they've still got a few more days, but here in North Carolina, you've got 1 more day of early voting. So who here has voted early already? Wow. What the hell are you guys doing here? Go get a friend and take him to the polls. Who is still planning to vote either in a few days or on Election Day? That's still a pretty good crew. All right, sounds good. So, look, however you're going to vote, if you plan to vote early, and please, we'd love to bank as many votes as possible, you've got to do it by tomorrow. And here's the thing, I was talking to the great leadership of the state GOP, and it sounds like if you guys get out there and do your job and get your friends and family to the polls tomorrow, we're going to go into Election Day with something we have never had from the early vote in the state of North Carolina, a lead. And that's a very big thing for this campaign. So we're going to win Election Day voting in the state of North Carolina, but normally we've got to win Election Day voting by a big margin. I think that on Election Day we're going to win by a big margin, but that's going to mean a North Carolina landslide. Let's make it happen. Let's make this thing too big to rig. I don't want to win North Carolina by 20,000 votes. I want to win North Carolina by 200,000 votes, and I'd like to have your help getting there. So I'm going to make a few requests before we sort of get started and we talk about why we're going to make Donald Trump the next president. Let's talk about the how. So number one, there's a website, swampthevoteusa.com, swampthevoteusa.com. We built that website to show you your polling location so you can check where you can go vote. You can check how to get involved in these last few days, but we've got to get out there and make it happen. So number one, go to swampthevoteusa.com. Number two, I'm going to ask every single person here over the next few days the next few minutes to take out your phone, take a photo of what we're doing here, and go and post it on social media or send it by text or email, whatever your method of communication is. We know that Kamala Harris and her allies in the corporate media, they're never going to tell the truth about this campaign. They're never going to tell the truth about Donald Trump, but you know who can tell the truth? We can. So take out those phones, take a photo, and tell people why you're voting for Donald J. Trump for President of the United States. And the final request I want to make is this. I want every person here, and it looks like a lot of you have already voted, but I want every person here to vote 10 times. The legal way. We've got New York Times reporters in the back, and I'm sure they're going to write later today that JD Vance came to Selma, North Carolina, encouraged mass voter fraud at his event. But here's how you can vote the legal way 10 times is you take yourself out to vote and you get 9 of your friends and family to go along with you. And if we do that, we're going to win the state of North Carolina. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about our Democratic opponents, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And I see you feel about him the same way I do. I will say, about poor Tim Walz. I know we have some great Christian people here, and I'm sure people of other faiths. If you would, spare a prayer for Tim Walz, because he's got the toughest job in American politics. Tim Walz has got to go out there and try to convince our fellow citizens that Kamala Harris is fit to be President of the United States. That is a tough job, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the problem with Tim Walz's argument about Kamala Harris is the record is the record. Kamala Harris has been vice president for 3.5 years, and because of her leadership, or lack thereof, North Carolinians are paying over $1,000 more per month to afford today what they could have afforded when Donald J. Trump was president. Because of Kamala Harris's leadership, we saw today the private sector lost 28,000 jobs. And manufacturing, we actually lost 46,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector just in the last month because of Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, it's interesting. If you read the details of that job report, what it'll tell you is that even though we lost 28,000 private sector jobs, we gained 12,000 jobs. You know what that means? That means we created a lot of jobs in government, but not a lot of jobs in the private sector. We created a lot of jobs for IRS bureaucrats who are going to harass you, but not a lot of jobs for hardworking North Carolina families. That means we shipped, when we talk about losing 46,000 manufacturing jobs, that means we're shipping a lot of good North Carolina jobs to Mexico, to China, but we're not creating a lot of good jobs for North Carolina families who need them. So in 4 short days, we get to send a message to Kamala Harris. We don't trust your promises. We don't trust your slogans. We trust what you have done in the last 4 years. It has been a failure, and we are going to say to Kamala Harris, you are fired. We're going back to the leadership of Donald J. Trump. You know, here's the thing about Kamala Harris. Here I am, being all bipartisan. I said something nice about Tim Walz. I asked you guys to pray for Tim Walz, right? That was nice of me, and I'm going to say something nice about Kamala Harris. I think that every time she gives an interview, we gain about 50,000 votes. And if, by the way, I watch Kamala Harris's interviews so that you don't have to. That is the sacrifice that I'm willing to engage in as your next vice president. I watch Kamala Harris on TV so that you guys can actually enjoy the television program. You don't have to watch Kamala Harris. So she said on The View a couple of weeks ago, don't do it, my friends. Do not watch Kamala Harris on The View. You'll lose about 20 IQ points if you do. And we need you. We need you as strong and as smart as possible over the next 4 days. But she says on The View, remember, the whole argument of her campaign is that she is somehow going to fix the problems that she created in the first place. Remember, thanks to Kamala Harris's leadership, gas prices in North Carolina are up 40%. Thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, grocery prices in this state are up over 20%. Thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, housing has become unaffordable for young North Carolina families. That is the record of Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, she doesn't like to own up to that record. She doesn't like to fess up to that record, so what does she do? She goes around and in her scripted speeches with a teleprompter telling her what to say, she says that she has nothing to do with the leadership of the last 4 years. She would almost have you believe that she's never even met Joe Biden, even though she is the sitting vice president, and she cast the tie-breaking vote on many of the worst policies of the last 4 years. But In her defense, while she lies when there's a teleprompter telling her what to say, she will occasionally answer a question honestly. And I think that's what a true Kamala Harris gaffe is, when she accidentally tells you the truth about what she's been doing for the last few years. Now, in the View interview, they said, what would you have done differently from Joe Biden over the last 4 years? And Kamala Harris said, nothing comes to mind. Now, that could be, in her defense, that could be the slogan of the Harris-Walz campaign. Harris-Walz, nothing comes to mind. But in a 20-second interview clip, Kamala Harris revealed that the entire argument of her campaign is fundamentally not true, because she represents the same tired approach, the same failed policies of the last 4 years, and I don't think North Carolina families can afford it. I don't think North Carolina families want it. And what I do think that North Carolina families want is to get back to the common sense leadership of Donald J. Trump, and that's what we're going to do. Now, just think about this. Our fellow citizens, the people who are watching this on TV, our fellow citizens cannot afford 4 more years of the exact same failed policies of Kamala Harris's leadership. You know that credit card delinquencies in our country have gone up to over 9%? That means about 1 in 10 of our fellow citizens can't afford their bills because of what Kamala Harris is doing. And I happen to think, my friends, that the definition of insanity is to try the same thing expecting different results. We have got to try something different. And the good thing about Donald J. Trump, it's not just a bunch of plans, and it's not just a bunch of promises. When Donald J. Trump was president for 4 years, he actually delivered. And that's something that's different about the career politicians in Washington, D.C. So yeah, Donald Trump has a plan to get back to low inflation and affordable groceries, but it's not just a plan, because when Donald Trump was president, grocery prices were stable and inflation was at 1.5%, which was a historical low. When Donald J. Trump was president, wages were rising at the fastest rate in 40 years in the United States of America. When Donald Trump was president, people could afford their mortgage payments, they could afford their credit card payments, because the economy was doing well and we were enjoying a golden age of American prosperity. And importantly, when Donald J. Trump was president, the border was secure and we were deporting people who came into this country illegally. Now, there's a connection, of course, there's a big connection between what I think is the biggest problem for Americans who are suffering from the affordability crisis and the illegal immigration problem. You know, one of the biggest issues for North Carolina families, especially our young families, is they can't afford homes anymore. And what President Trump wants, is we want to pursue the kind of economic policies where North Carolina families can actually afford to buy a home in this state that all of us love. And that's not happening right now. You talk to young people in this country right now, they're terrified that if we keep going down the Kamala Harris route, they're not going to be able to afford to buy a home. They're not going to be able to afford to start a family. They're not going to be able to afford to put groceries and food on the table because Kamala Harris is pursuing some really crazy economic policies. Well, we happen to think that we got to take this country in a different direction. And here are 2 concrete things that we're going to do to make housing more affordable. And that's one of my favorite things, by the way, about Kamala Harris, is you ask her, what specifically do you want to do to make housing more affordable for North Carolina families? And she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family, or, well, I used to work at McDonald's, and I was really good at making the hash browns. That's what Kamala Harris will say. And by the way, I don't even know if I believe that. I think maybe Donald J. Trump has worked at McDonald's longer than Kamala Harris has. But here is the concrete plan for how we're going to lower housing prices for North Carolina families. And I got to tell you, my friends, I grew up in a working-class family. Number one, specifically, we got to build more homes. We don't build enough homes in the United States of America. And because we don't build enough homes, the cost of housing has gotten way too expensive for North Carolina families. Now think about this. We are the people, we are the country that 50 years ago, our ancestors built rockets that went to the moon with pocket calculators and slide rules. And now, thanks to Kamala Harris's regulations, we don't build enough homes for American families. So let's change that. Let's undo those ridiculous regulations and empower American families to build the homes that American families are going to live in. But the honest and difficult truth is that no matter how many homes we build, if we don't ensure that American homes go to American citizens, it is never going to be enough. And this, my friends, is the connection between the border crisis and the housing affordability crisis. When you let 25 million people into the United States of America who have no legal right to be here, you roll out the red carpet for illegal immigration, you promise to give them Social Security, Medicare, and housing benefits, you've got to put those 25 million people somewhere. And we know that when illegal aliens get homes that ought by right go to American citizens, it makes the American dream of homeownership unattainable for millions upon millions of our people. So when Donald J. Trump is president, we are going to follow a very simple principle. Yes, we're going to build more homes, but we're going to make sure that American homes go to American citizens, not to people who don't have the legal right to be here. And look, the border crisis is more than just a housing crisis. The border crisis is a drug crisis because we've allowed the Mexican drug cartels to bring in fentanyl at record levels. We've got 100,000 American citizens who are dying of fentanyl overdoses every single year because Kamala Harris let the drug cartels turn this country into a drug trafficking zone. Now, a lot of you know my story. A lot of you know that my family struggled. My mom struggled with addiction. And I'm proud of my mom, my friend. She's now about to celebrate 10 years clean and sober, and I'm so proud of her. But in the same way that my family got a second chance with my mom, in the same way that my mom got an opportunity to fully become clean and sober, I want the same thing to happen for all of our citizens. And it's not going to happen, my friends, if we're importing by the tens of thousands pounds of fentanyl that are depriving our citizens of that second chance to get clean and sober. So here's a simple proposal, Kamala Harris. Why don't we stop using the IRS to wage war on American citizens? Let's use the U.S. military to wage war on those Mexican drug cartels and get the poison out of the United States of America once and for all. While Kamala Harris is saying roll out the red carpet for millions upon millions of illegal immigration, Donald J. Trump has a different plan. Pack your bags, illegal immigrants, because in 3 months, you're going back home. While Kamala Harris has let 425,000 illegal immigrant violent criminals to set up shop in the United States of America, Donald Trump wants to get them the hell out of this country and keep them out of this country once and for all. And we can't. 425,000 illegal immigrant criminals, that is an unfathomable number of people who don't even have the legal right to be in this country. That's more than twice the size of the United States Marine Corps. I'm a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Semper Fi to all the Marines. And we thank everybody for their service, whatever branch of service they served in, but more than double the size of the United States Marine Corps in this country because Kamala Harris refuses to do her job as border czar. That's a disgrace. And we can do so much better, and we will in 4 days when we make Donald J. Trump the president-elect once again. Now, here's the thing that really bothers me about Kamala Harris. It's not just that I disagree with her on public policies. Yeah, Republicans are always going to disagree with Democrats. It's that Kamala Harris, instead of persuading her fellow citizens, she would rather censor you and silence you. Think about this. When confronted with her citizens who are telling Kamala Harris that you did a terrible job by opening up the southern border, what does Kamala Harris do? She calls them racist. She calls them nativists. She calls them bad people for daring to notice that Kamala Harris flooded this country with Mexican drug cartels and fentanyl. When confronted with her wide open southern border, Kamala Harris would rather call you names than fix this country's problems. When confronted with the fact that Americans can't afford groceries, she would rather insult her fellow citizens, call them fascists, and call them garbage, rather than recognize that her policies have been a failure. Here's a simple statement, my friends, and I think we speak for all of our fellow citizens. Whether you agree with our politics or not, whoever you're voting for, and we certainly hope that you're going to vote the right way and make Donald J. Trump the next president. That's right. There he is. Don't worry. I think I'm going to make Don sing for his supper here. We're going to call Don up here in a second. But here's the thing. When we spoke at Michigan before, oh, we got one here too. We got one here. You see this garbage truck over here? You know, if you're struggling, my friends, with the price of groceries, you're not garbage. If you're pissed off about Kamala Harris's open border, you're not a bad person. And I, for one, am sick of having an American leadership that attacks the citizens of this country rather than solving this country's problems. So while I think it's ridiculous that Kamala Harris calls us garbage, I do think that in 4 days we ought to take out the trash in Washington, D.C., and that is Kamala Harris and her failed leadership. Think about this. I mean, look, President Trump is well known as the best counterpuncher in American politics. You don't want to go after Donald Trump if you work in politics, trust me. But as much as Donald Trump will criticize Kamala Harris, and as much as he'll point out that her policies have been a failure, I'm proud to say that not once has me or President Trump attacked Kamala Harris's voters. Never once. Because here's what we believe. Whether you vote for Donald J. Trump and make the right decision, or whether you vote for Kamala Harris and make the wrong decision, we are going to usher a golden age of American prosperity, whoever you voted for, because we love this country, and Donald Trump is going to be the president for all of us, not just the people who agree with him politically. You're not garbage for wanting the southern border enforced. You're not garbage for wanting to afford the price of groceries. You're not garbage for thinking that Kamala Harris has done a bad job. And you're not garbage for loving this country enough to vote for change, to vote the bums out, and to vote for Donald J. Trump to be the next president of the United States. And on that note, let me just close with a couple of comments before I bring Don up here. First of all, I've lost a lot of friends because of my public service and my politics over the last couple of years. And what I'd ask you to do is not to take the Democrats' bait. I want you, over the next 4 days, I want you to work as hard for us as you can. I want you to work as hard to persuade your friends and family that Donald J. Trump is the candidate of peace and prosperity, that Donald J. Trump is the candidate of a secure southern border, and that Donald J. Trump, when he's president, is going to make groceries and gas affordable for our people once again. I want you to convince them of that because it's true, and all of us here believe it. But if you're not able to convince them, and they do vote the wrong way, I want you to love those people anyway. Because I'm sick of Americans losing friends and losing family members over politics. I'm sick of Americans following Joe Biden and Kamala Harris into thinking that the people who disagree with them politically are bad people. They're not bad people. They may be wrong about politics, but I want us to lead. Because when Donald Trump is president, trust me, he says it in public, he says the same thing in private. He wants prosperity back for all of us, whoever we voted for, because that's the job of an American president, and those are the feelings of an American patriot. And I want you to get out there and vote, because a person who calls her fellow citizens garbage for having different politics is not fit to lead the United States of America. A person who says that when 30,000 patriots gather at Madison Square Garden to celebrate this country, who calls them fascists and Nazis, she is not fit to lead the greatest nation on earth. And so in 4 days, I don't want us to just make Donald Trump the President of the United States. I want us to reject Kamala Harris's broken policies. Let's reject Kamala Harris's open border. Let's reject Kamala Harris's broken economic leadership. And let's reject Kamala Harris attacking her fellow citizens instead of serving this great nation. My friends, we got 4 days. Let's go get it done. God bless you. Thank you for having me. And let's get our man over the finish line. Thank you all.
Hello, Detroit, auto workers.
No.
Thank you for your time. You work a 40-hour week.
We're not done yet. I told you I was going to make Don sing for supper here. So without further ado, let me invite my friend and a great patriot up here to address the great patriots of North Carolina. Don, come up and say a few words. Let's give Don a round of applause.
I don't know, it's not often that I dislike following someone in politics. Normally they make it pretty easy because you get the Kamala Harris word salad or some sort of other nonsense, but how great is JD? What I love most about JD is now, for our movement, for America First, isn't it nice to have a bench? Isn't it nice to have people that'll fight for you the way my father has fought for you? And that's what we have to do, guys. For the next few days, we gotta run, we gotta fight, we gotta vote like you're the third monkey in line for the Ark and it's starting to rain. And that's the reality. You see it all every day, right? You see, this poll's designed to make you overconfident, so you sit at home. This poll's designed to demoralize you, so you sit at home. Don't fall for any of the psyops. Don't fall for any of the nonsense. Overwhelm them. Bring your friends, call your neighbors, text everyone you know, especially in the swing states. Just get them out and vote. It's a unique election. We're used to politicians who are making promises. They'll tell you everything you need to hear. They get your vote, then they do whatever the swamp or their special interest billionaire friends tell them to do. This election, it's actually different. You've actually lived under the policies of both administrations. You've been there. You've seen it. You had 4 years under Trump. And you've had 4 years under Biden and Harris. And the reality is this, folks. You went from a time of prosperity to a time of poverty, like that, in an instant, because of incompetence, because they rather follow the woke playbook than use common sense. We went from a time of peace to a time of war. There's a reason that the Democrats are embracing Dick and Liz Cheney. They're going to send your kids to war. We're going to be at World War III. No one can tell us why we'd even be there, but we'll be there because a couple guys in Washington, D.C. are going to get rich because of it. We know nothing's going to change because Kamala Harris told us she wouldn't do anything differently. She's said that 7 or 8 times now. And you would think, after the first time, you'd think maybe, I don't know, just maybe, after even the liberal press destroys you, you think when you're asked the question the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth time what you'd do differently, you'd think you'd be smart enough to come up with like an answer. But she's not. That's why I love this. I love this podium. I love that JD speaks. You notice how there's not a teleprompter here? I was in Batcave, North Carolina this morning. We were handing out literally like $250,000 worth of KUIU gear to people who lost everything, clothing, for the volunteers, for the people who are fighting. With the great folks at Samaritan's Purse doing the work that FEMA should be doing. I was up there 2 weeks ago, much closer to the incident, and I got to see both the worst of Mother Nature as well as the best of America, the best of humanity in action. Guys, it's not that hard. We can fix these things, but we can't do it by ourselves. We can't do it alone. We've seen that. When my father was the president of the United States, they canceled, shut down, suppressed, censored the most powerful man in the world. They then tried to impeach him twice. They tried to jail him. They tried to take away his businesses. They want to put him away for 750 years. Seems like a long time for like creating jobs, low interest rates, a solid economy, like peace deals in the Middle East. I know that goes against everything Washington stands for, but it seems rather extreme. And I understand my dad is a young and vibrant man, but 750 years seems like a very long time, even for him. So guys, it's in your hands at this point, okay? One guy can't do it by himself, but with an army of you, putting in every effort imaginable for the next few days, we can win. It's not a fair fight. We don't pretend it is. You see the press today, right? My father says, it's strange. If Liz Cheney wants to be in all of these wars, she should pick up arms. But it seems like the people that get us in the wars never seem to be the people fighting them. The media says, Donald Trump thinks that Liz Cheney should be shot. But that's what we're dealing with, right? They have nothing else. They can't run on their accomplishments because they have none. The only things they've changed are for the worse for Americans, and everyone sees it. But we are still up against a very powerful machine. It's a $1 trillion industry, the mainstream media. $1 trillion in big tech backstopping them, censoring and suppressing all of you while artificially boosting their nonsense. But again, if we all get together, we all put in that effort, we all put in that time, we can and we will fix our country. We will make it great again. So I'm going to give the mic back to JD because I was running around. I'm a little late. I apologize, JD. I was a little late, but I think we're doing some good for North Carolina. You guys are the best. That energy, that will, that fight, that will, it's the exact same thing like we saw with my father when he got up on July 13th after getting shot in the face. Bring that for the next 4 days because that is America. That's the spirit. That's what we're going for, and with it, we are going to win big. Guys, get out there and do your part. Thank you so much, North Carolina. It's awesome to be here. Thank
you. Just an awesome guy and an awesome family. Thank you. So, what? Let me leave you with one final thought here. And Don, thank you. Thank you for your family's leadership and service. But think about what the stakes are. Because I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in red team versus blue team that we forget that what's ultimately at stake is not just beating Kamala Harris, as fun as that will be. What's ultimately at stake, my friends, is that there are people in our country who are hurting, who could have better lives if Donald J. Trump gets back in the White House. There are mothers who are mourning teenagers who died of fentanyl overdoses because their kids made a teenage mistake and took something that happened to be laced with the poison brought in by the Mexican drug cartels. There's a woman I met just a little while ago who told me that for 40 years, she and her husband did steak night every Friday night, but they canceled it last year because under Kamala Harris's policies, steaks just got a little too expensive. I've talked to a lot of people who can't afford groceries. I've talked to people who have lost their loved ones from the violence, from the drug cartels, or the violent migrants that have come in over the last 3 years. I've talked to American young people who would love to start a family, who would love to get married, but they're worried that they're not going to be able to afford to buy a home to raise that family in. Every single one of our citizens deserves, if they work hard and play by the rules, to live a good life in this country that all of us love. Our fellow citizens deserve to be able to buy groceries. Our fellow citizens deserve to earn a good wage for a hard day's work. Our fellow citizens deserve to have safety and security in their neighborhoods, and they're only going to get it if we do our jobs and make Donald J. Trump the next president of the United States. 4 days to go. God bless you guys. Let's get it done. I love you, North Carolina.
Hello, Detroit, auto worker, let me thank you for your time. You work a 40-hour week for a living, just to send it on down the line. Hello, Pittsburgh, steel mill worker, let me thank you for your time. You work a 40-hour week for a living, just to send it on down the line. This is for the one who swings the hammer, driving home the nail. For the one behind the counter, ringing up the sales.